My father slid the car keys across the kitchen table like he was passing the salt. No hesitation, no apology, just keys scraping against wood, stopping right in front of my sister. She needed it more than you do, he said. I stared at those keys. Then I looked up at him. But Dad, that was Grandma's money. She left it for me. He didn't even blink. We made a decision. It's done. My sister picked up the keys and twirled them around her finger. She was smiling, not a happy smile, the kind of smile that knows it won. I looked back down at my hands, empty, flat on the table. And then the phone on the counter lit up. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but that call was about to change everything. My name's Celeste. I'm 34 years old, and I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio where everybody knew everybody and family meant everything. At least, that's what I was told it meant. I work as a freelance medical billing specialist. I know, it's not glamorous. Nobody's impressed at dinner parties. But I built that work from nothing, starting with a community college program I paid for myself, taking night classes while working days, surviving on cheap coffee, and the quiet belief that it would eventually be worth it. I'm the middle child, 3 kids total, and if you know anything about middle children, you already know the role I played. I was the responsible one, the one my parents didn't worry about because I never caused drama, never asked for too much, never made noise. I handled things. I figured things out. I stayed in my lane. My younger sister, Adrienne, was a different story. She was always the prized child, the one they showed off, the one they talked about at church and at family dinners and on Facebook. She had the looks, the charm, the so-called potential. And my parents poured everything into that potential, their time, their energy, their praise. She was the one they always noticed walking into a room. I was the one who stayed and cleaned up after everyone left. But I kept going. I got my certification, I built my client list, I saved carefully, lived simply, and never complained out loud. And through all of it, there was one person who saw exactly what I was doing, Grandma Rosa. She used to hold my face in her hands and say, Celeste, you are the one who will surprise them all. I used to laugh it off. Now I hold on to those words like they're the last warm thing I own. I wasn't the favorite, I wasn't flashy, but I had something my family never counted on. I was paying attention. The whole time, I was paying attention. And if you've ever been the dependable one in your family, the one who holds things together quietly while everyone else gets the applause, you already know exactly how this feels. You don't have to explain it to anyone here. If that's your story, hit subscribe and join this community. Drop a comment and tell me you're here. And if this already feels like your life, click hype so we can keep this space going for people like us. Let's keep going. Grandma Rosa got sick in the spring. It wasn't a slow, drawn-out illness. It moved fast, the way those things sometimes do, and by June, she was gone. 78 years old, sharp until the very end, and deeply, quietly generous in the way only certain people manage to be. Before she passed, she had written a letter, handwritten in her careful cursive on her good stationery, the kind she kept in the blue box on her dresser. In that letter, she stated clearly that she wanted $8,500 to go to me, not to the family, to me, Celeste, by name. She explained her reasons. She said I had worked hard and asked for nothing, and that she wanted me to have a real start. $8,500. I know that doesn't sound like much to some people, but to me it meant paying off the last of my certification debt, which had been sitting on me like a stone for 3 years. It meant finally breathing. It meant Grandma Rosa seeing me, even at the end, and doing something about it. My parents were the ones who handled her accounts. The money had come through a joint account they had access to, and because the letter wasn't filed through a lawyer, they had technical control over the funds. I didn't love that, but I trusted them. She was their mother. They knew what she wanted. 2 weeks after the funeral, I called my mom to ask about the timeline for the transfer. She got quiet for a second. Then she said, well, Adrienne needed a reliable car for her new job, so we took care of that. I thought I had misheard her. What do you mean you took care of that? Your sister is trying to build her life, Celeste. Grandma would have understood. The floor dropped out from under me. "Mom, Grandma wrote my name. She chose me. That letter was for me." My dad got on the phone. His voice was flat. "And we chose your sister. Move on." I found out later, from a cousin who let something slip at the wrong moment, that Adrian had gone to my parents before Grandma Rosa was even buried. She had asked them to use the money for a car. She knew about the letter. She went to them anyway. She didn't just receive what they gave her, she asked for it, while I was still grieving. About a week after the phone call, my parents organized a small dinner to celebrate Adrian's new car. I was invited. I came because I didn't know what else to do. But I noticed right away that I was seated at the far end of the table, away from the main conversation, the way you'd seat a neighbor you felt obligated to include. My parents sat close to Adrian. They laughed with her. They passed her food first. At one point, I tried to bring up the inheritance quietly. I wasn't even planning to make a scene. I just wanted to say something. My mother leaned over and whispered, "Don't ruin tonight," like I was the problem, like I was the one who had done something wrong. I sat back in my chair and said nothing. The food tasted like nothing. The room smelled like pot roast and candle wax, and something I can only describe as the specific scent of being erased. A few weeks later, we were all at my cousin Derek's backyard cookout. Adrian was in full performance mode, telling anyone who would listen about her new car. My Aunt Patricia came over to me with a plate of potato salad and said kindly, "Didn't Rosa leave you something, honey?" Before I could open my mouth, my mother appeared from nowhere. "We handled it as a family," she said smoothly. "Celeste was fine with everything." I was standing right there. I wasn't fine. I had never said I was fine, but the way my mother said it, with that calm and certain voice, made me sound like I had signed off on the whole thing. My aunt nodded and walked away, and I just stood there holding my plate, humiliated in the middle of a cookout while Adrian laughed about her car's sunroof. The final twist came from my own mother, on a phone call she initiated. She told me I was being selfish, that I was holding on to something petty that had hurt the whole family. Her voice was soft, but her words had edges. "Grandma loved all of us, Celeste. You act like you were her only grandchild." That sentence did something to me. It made me start to question myself. Maybe I was remembering the letter wrong. Maybe Grandma didn't mean it the way I thought. Maybe I was making too much of this. That's what manipulation does to you. It doesn't hit you over the head. It whispers until you start to sound crazy to yourself. But I stopped fighting. I stopped calling. I went quiet. Not because I gave up, because I was thinking. What they didn't know was that I had kept something, something small and easy to forget, something my mother didn't know existed. 2 months before Grandma Rosa passed, I visited her alone on a Tuesday afternoon. It was an ordinary visit. We sat in her living room and she made tea, even though her hands weren't steady anymore. We talked for a long time, about nothing, about everything. At some point, she asked me to hand her my phone because she wanted to show me a photo I'd sent her that she couldn't find in her messages. And then she stopped scrolling and looked at me with those steady eyes of hers and said, "I want to say something, and I want it to be saved somewhere they can't touch." I didn't fully understand what she meant. I just held the phone steady while she spoke into the camera. She said she was leaving her money to me. She said I had worked hard without asking for recognition, and that she was proud of me in ways she hadn't said out loud enough. And then she looked directly into the lens and said clearly, "I have already told my son and his wife not to interfere with this. If they do, I want there to be a record of my wishes." She remembered everything. She had already seen what might happen. I forgot about the video in the weeks after her death. Grief does that. It buries things. But one night, about 6 weeks after the cookout, I couldn't sleep. I picked up my phone and started scrolling through my camera roll without thinking. And then I saw the thumbnail. Her face, her living room, her tea on the table beside her. I watched it 3 times. Then I put the phone down and I made a call. Gerald Hutchins had been a family attorney for over 30 years before he retired. He had handled some of Grandma Rosa's paperwork years ago, property-related things, and he had actually advised her at one point to formalize her inheritance wishes through a proper legal document. She had nodded and thanked him and never followed through, but Gerald remembered her, and when I called him and explained what had happened, he asked me to come in the next day. He watched the video twice. He read the handwritten letter. He sat back in his chair and was quiet for a moment. "This isn't a formal will," he said, "but combined, these two things tell a very clear story. You'd have a reasonable basis for a civil claim, but more than that, you have something that could matter more than a courtroom." He meant the family, the extended family who had no idea what my parents had done. Gerald told me to wait. There was a memorial dinner coming up, the 1 month mark after Grandma Rosa's passing, and almost everyone would be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins. He said to let him come with me as a family friend who had known Rosa. He said to trust the moment. Meanwhile, my parents were moving through the world like nothing had happened. Adrienne posted photos of herself in the car, tagging my parents, adding captions about fresh starts and new chapters. My mother commented a heart. Not a single word about Rosa, not a single word about me. They had already written the version of events where everything was fine and everyone had moved on. They thought I had moved on with them. They were wrong. The memorial dinner was held on a Saturday evening at my parents' house. The dining room table was extended with the extra leaf, the way it only got on holidays. It smelled like Rosa's favorite dish, the one my aunt always made with rosemary and garlic. And for a second, walking through the door, I almost lost my composure, because the smell of that room reminded me of every good memory I had in this family, before all of this. I held it together. I had brought Gerald. I introduced him simply as a family friend who had known Rosa for many years. My parents' faces went tight for just a moment, but they couldn't say anything without looking rude in front of everyone, so they smiled and welcomed him in, and I watched my father's jaw do the thing it does when he's trying not to react. After dinner, Gerald quietly asked if he could say a few words about Rosa. The room agreed immediately. People loved the idea. An aunt reached for a tissue before he even started. He spoke about Rosa gently and warmly. He talked about her strength and her clarity, her way of seeing people for exactly who they were. And then he paused. Rosa was the kind of woman who planned ahead, he said. She wanted to make sure the people she loved were taken care of, and she took steps to make sure her wishes were on record. He looked at me. My hands were steady. I found the video, I pressed play, and set it on the table where everyone could hear. And Grandma Rosa's voice filled that room. It was clear. It was calm. It was completely, unmistakably her. She said my name. She said what she wanted. She said she had already spoken to my parents about not interfering. She said, "I want there to be a record." Someone started crying almost immediately. I think it was Aunt Patricia. I didn't look around. I kept my eyes forward. My father opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He closed it again. My sister was looking at the floor. Her hands were in her lap and she was completely still, which was unusual for her. She didn't say a word, not one. When the video ended, I spoke. I wasn't wowed. I wasn't shaking. "I didn't come here tonight to humiliate anyone," I said, "but I needed this family to know the truth. Grandma saw me. She made a choice, and I needed you all to know what that choice was." My mother's voice came out thin and careful. "We did what we thought was best." Gerald shifted in his seat. "I'd be happy to sit down privately with whoever needs to discuss next steps," he said. Quiet, polite, unmistakable. The room understood what that meant, and so did my parents. There were no dramatic outbursts that night, no screaming, no broken dishes. It was quieter than that, and somehow that made it more powerful. People finished their coffee and said their goodbyes, and the house emptied out slowly. My parents stood in their own kitchen looking like people who had just realized a wall they had built was made of paper. Within 2 weeks, my father called me. He said they would repay the $8,500 in installments over 6 months. He didn't apologize, really, but his voice had something in it I hadn't heard before, something that sounded close to shame. I accepted the arrangement. I didn't celebrate, I didn't rub it in, I just said okay and got off the phone. What I felt wasn't victory exactly. It was something quieter, like finally being able to put something heavy down. When the payments came in, I used every dollar the way Rosa had intended. I cleared my certification debt completely. Then I opened a savings account, and I named it Rosa's Gift, not as a monument, just as a reminder of who believed in me when it cost her something to say so. Some cousins reached out in the weeks that followed, a few aunts. Aunt Patricia sent me a card with a handwritten note that just said, "She was right about you." I read it 4 times, and then I put it in the blue box I had kept from Rosa's dresser, next to her good stationery. My relationship with my parents is different now, smaller, more honest in a way, because I stopped pretending things were fine when they weren't. Adrian and I don't speak much. I don't hate her, but I know now who she showed me she was, and I believe people when they show me things. Grandma Rosa made one final call, not from beyond a grave, but from a Tuesday afternoon in her living room 2 months before she left us, with a cup of tea beside her and her eyes steady on my phone camera. She knew what was coming. She knew who her son and his wife were, and she did something about it. She always knew, and she made sure I would be okay. Has someone in your family taken something that was meant for you, money, an inheritance, a final gift, and then acted like it was theirs to decide? Drop your story in the comments right now. I am reading every single one. You are not alone in this, and you are not wrong for feeling the way you feel. If you're rebuilding after something like this, subscribe and stay with this community. We understand what this kind of hurt feels like, and click hype to help this story reach someone else who needs to hear it tonight. Standing up for yourself inside your own family is one of the hardest things you can do. If you've been there, subscribe and become part of this community. Let me know this story helped by clicking hype, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel.